Hello, welcome to a life chapter reading by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today's book is A Tennis Pro to Die For by Judy Moore. Prologue. The golden doodle jerked her leash and took off running toward a group of rare pink ivies munching on some grubworms. It was all Essie Walters could do to keep up with Sasha as she bolted down the walking path toward the long-beaked birds. In the first rays of the early morning sun, the dog looked like a curly blonde streak as she scattered the seabirds and sent them flying in a gorgeous flash of pink toward a cluster of coconut palms across the canal and out of the dog's reach. Essie rose at 5:30 each morning to take Sasha for an hour-long walk just as the South Florida sun was rising. She was on her favorite route today, along the picturesque, well-tended walking path beside the road that led into the Golden Palms Country Club community. Seeing the pink ivies had been a real treat, even though her 62-year-old shoulders still ached from Sasha's dash to chase them. Now, the dog was jerking her leash again, pulling Essie towards something ahead that was blocking the path. As the sun began to peak above the horizon, its rays emitted just enough light for Essie to see that whatever lay ahead was not normal. She tugged on Sasha's leash for her to slow down. Squinting, Essie could make out that it was a person lying on the ground, blocking the path, which gave her pause. She was alone on a deserted road so early in the morning that almost no one was awake and only a couple of cars had passed by. But she wasn't a woman to live in fear. And, besides that, she had Sasha to protect her, though she'd never called on the dog to protect her before, and she had her cell phone in her pocket, which she grabbed a hold of as she approached. As Essie inched forward, her apprehension turned to alarm. The person was lying in a crumpled heap, and blood was everywhere. When she reached what she quickly realized wasn't a live person, but a body, she bent to see the face. "Oh no," she gasped in recognition. "It's that tennis player who jogs here every morning." That tennis pro. Chapter 1. 3 days earlier. When the fuzzy yellow ball bounced in front of Beck, she swooshed her racket forward, missed the ball completely, twirled all the way around, and almost fell down. The 4 other women in the beginners' tennis clinic at the Golden Palms Racket Club snickered. One of them laughed out loud. Beck felt the heat rise in her cheeks, and it wasn't from the hot Florida sun. She glanced at her sister Lizzie sitting on the clubhouse porch, watching the lesson. Lizzie looked like she wanted to leap onto the court and strangle the women. The tall, lean tennis pro, his long brown hair pulled back into a delicious man bun, quickly strode around the net to Beck's side of the court. "It's okay, Beck. The backhand is not so easy," Gilles said, his soft French accent immediately calming her nerves. He moved behind her, wrapped his arms around her, and showed her the backhand motion. Beck heard a couple of the women in the group gasp. "You do not have to swing so hard," he said, as he swung the racket slowly with her a few more times. "You see, the racket starts here," he pointing toward the back of the fence, "and finishes pointing towards the net." He dropped a ball in front of her, swung with her, and the ball sailed over the net. Beck jerked her head back in shock. Wide-eyed, she peered over her shoulder at the pro, and they both grinned. "You see," he said, "it is not so difficult." The tennis pro moved away to stand in front of her. "Now you must try by yourself." He helped her with her stance, showed her how to place both hands on the grip, and then dropped the ball in front of her. She swung slower this time and made contact, but the ball trickled into the bottom of the net. He clapped in appreciation. "So you see, you hit the ball, and the form is good. That is the first step. Soon it goes over the net." The swing did feel better, and Beck thanked him for his help. As he started to walk back to the hopper of his tennis balls, one of her classmates, a long-legged blonde in her 40s, called out to him, "Gilles, I'm having trouble with my backhand too. Can you help me?" Gilles turned back and waggled his finger at her with a grin. "No, no, Daphne, your backhand is fine." Daphne shrugged at the other women and whispered slyly, "Oh well, can't blame a girl for trying." They giggled as Beck took her place at the end of the line, and another woman stepped up for her turn to hit. A pretty 30-something brunette wearing a yellow Elise tennis dress eyed Beck suspiciously. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" "Did what?" Beck asked the woman uncomfortably, whose name she remembered was Camille. "Acted like you didn't have a clue so Gilles would give you individual attention?" Beck frowned. Was this woman serious? "No, Camille, I'm not acting. Really, I don't have a clue." Standing next to her, Daphne smirked. "Honestly, Camille, haven't you been watching her? She's not putting on an act. She obviously doesn't know what she's doing." Beck could feel her Irish temper rising. "Well, this is a beginner's class. I've never played before. I'm here to learn." A short, pencil-thin woman dressed in Nike from head to toe chimed in. "Hey, you two, give her a break. You've both taken this class 3 times before." Geez, Beck thought. No wonder they're so much better than I am. She stared at them defensively. "Why do you keep taking the beginner's class if you've already taken it?" Daphne stared at her as if she were crazy. She nodded her head toward Gilles. "Isn't it obvious? Do you think my husband would let me anywhere near eye candy like that if he had any idea?" Camille nodded in agreement. "Why do you think my husband is sitting over there on the porch watching my every move?" Beck glanced over at the long, covered veranda and noticed a tan, balding man dressed in tennis clothes sitting a few seats away from Lizzie. He stared back at her. "He wants me to get good enough to play mixed doubles with him," Camille explained. She added in a conspiratorial whisper, "But he doesn't want me to get any ideas about the tennis pro." "My husband is more suspicious of the other pro, Manny," Daphne whispered. Lowering her voice even more, she added, "And with good reason." Surprised, Camille gave her friend an envious stare. "Seriously? Aren't you the lucky one? I've had my eye on him too, when my husband isn't around." Good grief, Beck thought, wondering how she'd landed in this tennis version of Peyton Place. She began to understand why the other women in the clinic were in full makeup and dressed in what she guessed were the latest tennis fashions. She glanced down at her white gym shorts and blue tank top. Maybe she should feel underdressed, but she didn't think she deserved to wear a frou-frou tennis outfit until she could at least hit a few balls over the net. And she certainly wasn't looking for anything more from the tennis pro than instructions on how to hit the ball. She swiped a bead of perspiration off her forehead. Even though the lesson ran from 6 to 7 in the evening, July in South Florida was almost unbearably hot. Beck's usual summer routine was not to venture outside of her air-conditioned bookstore unless it was very early in the morning or after the sun had gone down at night. But her sister Lizzie had basically shamed her into taking these tennis lessons, harping on her that she didn't exercise enough and needed to get in better shape. Beck peered over at Lizzie, lounging on the deck chair under a ceiling fan with her feet propped up on another chair. Beck gave her a hang-dog look, fanning her face with her hand. Lizzie sat up, pumped her fist at Beck, and mouthed an energetic, "Come on!" Easy for you to say, Beck thought. 10 years younger than Beck at 19, Lizzie spent all day outside on the beach in her job as a lifeguard. So she was used to the heat. And she'd been the best player on her high school tennis team. Her advanced clinic with Gilles started right after Beck's class was finished. Beck exhaled a long breath, checked her watch, and groaned. The lesson was only half over. Why had she let Lizzie talk her into these tennis lessons? This wasn't her idea of fun. She couldn't imagine ever getting good enough to actually play a game, and this was only the third lesson in a series of 6, held every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 weeks. After today, she had to go through this 3 more times. That meant 3 more hours, too, of having to watch these ridiculous man-crazy women cavort around the court. Before the lesson was over, Beck managed to hit a few forehands and even one backhand over the net. You'd have thought she won Wimbledon for the fuss Gilles made over that backhand. He was such a kind, patient teacher that she found herself resenting the other women in her class for treating him like he was some kind of sex god. When the lesson had finished and Beck was leaving the court, she couldn't resist. "Merci beaucoup, Gilles." Obviously pleased, He stared at Beck in surprise. Vous parlez français? Un peu. Ma mère habite à Montréal. Ah, Montréal est une belle ville. J'avais plusieurs fois. Beck's eyes widened, and she gave an embarrassed laugh. Sorry, you lost me on that one. That's about all the French I know. I just returned from visiting my mother in Montreal and learned a few words. Gilles smiled. I say, Montreal is a beautiful city. I have traveled there many times. Yes, yes, it is. I hope to learn more of your beautiful language on my next trip. Gilles gave a little bow. Merci. At least you try. Many Americans do not. You will learn more on future visits. Beck felt the eyes of the other women on her as she practiced her French with Gilles. Camille's voice rang out behind her. Our river, Gilles. Beck stifled a laugh as the women's pronunciation, but Gilles graciously responded, Au revoir, Camille. Beck turned to see a self-satisfied smile settle into Camille's face, and the opposite emotion on the face of her husband as he approached her and took hold of her arm. Were you just flirting with him? He demanded. Camille jerked her arm away. I was just saying goodbye, Randall, for God's sake. It sounded like flirting to me, Randall repeated, scowling toward the tennis pro who was busy picking up tennis balls scattered around the court with his hopper. Come on, let's go. I'm not ready to go. It's hot out here, and I'm hungry, her husband told her. We're going. Camille rolled her eyes and sighed. Okay. She turned to the other woman. Well, I guess I'm leaving. Daphne, meet at the pool tomorrow afternoon? Daphne said she would, and then lingered as the other women gathered their belongings and left. She sauntered over to an errant tennis ball, picked it up, and headed for Gilles. I'll help you pick these up, she offered, dropping the ball into the hopper. You shouldn't have to do this all by yourself. Gilles gave her a surprised look and shrugged. Sure, he said, if you like. I will never turn down help to pick up the balls. Thank you. Beck flopped onto the seat next to Lizzie, and they both watched as Daphne made a show of bending from the waist and flashing her lacy tennis tights before handing off the balls to Gilles. For his part, Gilles seemed intent on gathering the tennis balls as quickly as possible and ignored Daphne. Lizzie grimaced. Poor Gilles. That lady is so obvious. She's so much older than him, it's ridiculous. And she's married, Beck added. She peered back out onto the court at the young tennis pro. How old do you think Gilles is? I know how old he is, Lizzie said. He told us. He's 23. That lady has to be in her 40s. Beck pursed her lips. You should have heard them talking during class, calling him eye candy. Some of them have taken the class 3 times just so they can oogle him. Lizzie leaned closer and whispered, Those ladies in your class are a bunch of bees. I can't believe they were making fun of you like that. Beck felt herself redden at the thought. I know, I'm not very good, but they've taken the class before. They should be better than I am. You hit a few good ones, Lizzie said encouragingly. You did better than last week. Beck laughed. The only way to go was up. Lizzie gave her a stern look. Don't be so hard on yourself. You're starting to catch on. I'll practice with you. I want you to beat those ladies' butts. They glanced back at the court and saw Daphne whispering to Gilles at the net. He kept peering up at the pro shop as if he wanted to escape. A few new players appeared on the porch who Beck recognized from Lizzie's advanced class. It went from 7 to 8 o'clock, and Beck had enjoyed watching them take their lesson with Gilles last week. Lizzie was so athletic, always so good at everything. Naturally, she was the best player in the class. Gilles saw the new arrivals and waved them onto the court. Ah, here are my future pros, he said cheerfully, with what sounded like relief. Lizzie joined 2 other women, a teenage boy, and a middle-aged man on the court. Daphne seemed disappointed and left the court begrudgingly. As she passed by Beck, she pretended to swoon. Be still, my heart, she said with an exaggerated sigh. Beck guessed this was how bored country club wives amuse themselves, by acting like lovesick teenagers. I'm working on him, Daphne whispered with a giggle. He'll give in one of these days. They all do. Beck groaned inwardly, wondering what the woman's husband would think. With that, Daphne was off, with one last flirtatious wave in Gilles' direction, which he ignored.